Thank you, Esther. Merci. Obrigado. Deliberately, I'm multilingual today because I think that's a very important part of the issues that we're looking at here, which is not just English-speaking part of Africa, but many different languages in the. I've been kind of thrown into this position at the last minute, so whether I can make it exciting or not, I don't know, but it's fairly impromptu, so let's see what we can do. Thank you very much, Dan. I think that was a very comprehensive, excellent presentation of the issues. We have obviously done some thinking about this in relation to the research project that we have undertaken on the informal economy in Uganda. And as part of that, we also looked at the current state of research on urban issues in Africa. I think what we can say is that there's a few key points that we've been looking at just find my notes here. The current modus operandi is internationally funded studies undertaken and usually led by international development agencies, consultancies, and universities in the global north, working with university, governmental, private consultants, and NGO partners in individual sub-Saharan African countries. If anyone can point to different sources of funding and different ways in which African research on urban issues is being carried out, I'd appreciate you to tell us about it, because I think that's the way it's working at the moment. With urban-related studies being few and far between, and with academic institutions generally woefully underfunded, this gives little impetus to building the necessary capacity. Local scholars are isolated and under-resourced. Inevitably, this gives rise to a brain drain, pressures to move abroad, PhDs undertaken in northern countries, frequently leading on to people staying on in those countries. And I do a lot of training of African students as well. I'm slightly upbeat about it because several people I've talked to, including Dan, have mentioned the fact that a number of scholars are coming back and are keen to take up positions in African universities. So I can see there's kind of a bit of a change going on there, which is a promising sign. Most senior scholars who remain in African universities have their time cut out to meet teaching and or management or private consultancy, and without appropriate levels of research assistance, their research capabilities are severely constrained. So there are lots of excellent scholars that we're already working with, but they're under pressure from different directions. And we discussed it, but there is an example, I won't go into it, I think it's a little bit personal, but it affects everybody. So in general, we can say the current, let me see if I can find my notes, that the institutional landscape for African urban research is very uneven and unstable. There are many different types of institutions involved, many different actors. The ones that we've listed in our research on this topic, universities, I want to concentrate particularly on universities. There's research platforms, there's the think tanks that we've seen in this event. There's various networks that exist. In particular, there's research projects and programs. Some of them are quite long. They go on for a few years, give some kind of continuity. More often or not, they're in rural development and urban development. There's government research institutions, there's intergovernmental bodies, UN Habitat, UNESCO, UNDP, UNEP, I've used all their publications for data on urban issues, African Development Bank, World Bank. There's the academic journals, and there's a series of academic journals that are based in Africa, as well as ones that are based in the north, serving Africa, NGOs, private consultancies, professional bodies, and local government associations, as well as governments, obviously. So there's a whole range of actors. There's a whole geography to deal with, the whole continent, a series of countries, and all different languages. And our challenge really is to think about what kind of institutional framework can we develop to deal with what is already, in the case of urban development, it's already a very multidisciplinary subject. Just to give you an example of that, in looking at the urban informal economy in Uganda and across sub-Saharan Africa, the disciplines where we found relevant information include the following: economics, economic development, development studies, business management, public policy and finance, sociology, gender studies, geography, health and safety, urban studies, urban and regional planning, and rural development. That's one small sector of urban research that we were looking at. So it is inherently multidisciplinary, and you cannot expect to gather all the necessary disciplines together probably in one place. So we are instinctively talking about networking of some kind. It has to be some kind of networking that we are looking at. It has to be multi-scalar, and it has to be, let me just finish here. Just generally a multi-scale approach. Finding the most effective way, A, to exchange knowledge that we've heard about, and B, how that also feeds into policy. And obviously the policymakers are very keen to make sure that our efforts serve the purpose of informed and positive policy. Just on the nature of the research that needs to be taking place, the work that we undertook in Uganda would be what I could call intensive research. It was participatory, an element of co-production in it, involving the stakeholders in depth. So it had a narrow focus. It's the amount of work that we can do in one or two cities in a small amount of time. But we also need extensive research. We need wider data across the whole of the urban sector, data on cities across countries. And the one point that was made early on, how much time have I got? Finish off, okay. Universities can play a very important role in collecting data on cities, and we have very little data on individual cities. So there's often quite a lot of good national data from household surveys on, which is sometimes broken down into urban and rural. But there's almost no data beyond demographic data on individual cities. This is an urgent requirement. Universities can play an important role in this. The research that IHS did in Maputo involved a local university who were involved in carrying out household surveys with local communities. An excellent example of where universities can play an important role. And we need to collect this data. And the more data that we collect on individual cities, the more we're also able to build up a picture of the urban system of a whole country and inform policy accordingly. Shall I leave it at that, Esther?